We got another segment we're going to get to, another story, which is even bigger, I believe, than this one, but somewhat related. In the meantime, if you could, please smash that like button for me. Hit the thumbs up, that like button. Let us know how we're doing. Comments for the algorithm are very much appreciated because that helps us overcome the YouTube algorithm, which has had us in a box for a year now. But we are trying to break out, and we need your help. Please like, comment, subscribe, share Courageous Media with everybody that you know. Get other people to watch it to the end. We really appreciate everybody being here. Now, the bigger story, I think, and some of you may have seen inklings of this, but this is getting wider and bigger as we go. So to lay the groundwork for this, let me check in with Tommy Tuberville, U.S. Senator, as he lays out some of the groundwork on this. Here we go.
It's absolutely amazing. It's all started back during the Obama years when Lois Lerner of the IRS was weaponized to go after these LLCs from conservative groups. Ever since then, if you go back and look at it, there's been a pattern of people being attacked on the Republican side. It's wrong. It needs to quit happening, and people need to be fired over it, not just these FBI agents, but let's go after Jack Smith. Let's go after the people that pulled the trigger to go after a sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump.
100%. Tommy Tuberville is absolutely right. Now, in case you don't know this story, it has now been broken by several news organizations. Kash Patel has released this, that the Jack Smith prosecutor's office, which, as we now know, was an illegal prosecutor's office. He wasn't even properly a special prosecutor because he had never been confirmed by the Senate. He never held a government job that allowed him to prosecute criminals under a federal banner. That's why the judge down in Florida basically threw him off the case. Said, you can't be here. You have not been properly vetted and confirmed by the Senate. So we got Jack Smith, who operated an illegal special prosecutor's office under the guise of ridiculous, Attorney General in name only, Merrick Garland, and the auto pen Joe Biden. Not only did he go after Trump, not only did he lock up every single person that was within 6,000 yards of the Capitol on January 6th, but now we find out that he was spying, illegally, mind you, on a minimum of 8 GOP senators during this time. And that this spying dates all the way back to the Obama years. Arctic frost, crossfire hurricane, they are all an intertwined mesh of corruption, illegality, sedition, and treason. It is an absolute swamp's nest. It's an absolute viper's nest in there. And again, really appreciate everybody rolling up. Thanks for being here. But let's keep diving into this because here is more information. Senator Grassley and others' announcement on the FBI oversight and the spying on 8 GOP senators. Here we go.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Senator Grassley. It is because of his relentless advocacy for whistleblowers that a lot of this information is surfacing right now. We wouldn't know about the list of 100 Republican entities that were targeted by Jack Smith's Arctic Frost investigation. I don't think we know about this as well. So we need whistleblowers. I think Dan Bongino and folks in the FBI, they don't know where all the records are hidden. They still don't. They're not necessarily getting 100% cooperation. But this is outrageous what has happened. I just want to give you a timeline of this. I think you've already got the FBI sheet that shows the number of members of Congress that were targeted. Representative Kelly, Senators Graham, Haggerty, Hawley, Sullivan, Tuberville, myself, Senator Lummis, and Blackburn. Now, this memo was dated September of 2023. To put it all into context, the Mar-a-Lago raid occurred in August of 2022. Jack Smith announced the indictments against President Trump in August of 2023. So this is almost 2 months later. They're casting this net, this fishing expedition against members of the Senate and the House. Again, I've been investigating this with Senator Grassley. This doesn't surprise me, but it should shock every American of what the Biden administration has done. And by the way, this is the first time I was targeted by the FBI. Under the Obama administration, the same thing happened to both Senator Grassley and I. As part of the Foreign Influence Task Force, we were giving a briefing to try and convince us that the Hunter Biden laptop was no big deal.
So the spying on senators goes back to Obama. It gets ramped up during the Biden years, during the Otto Penn Biden years of tyranny, when hundreds of Republicans, politicians, aides, members of Trump's inner circle, lawyers, whatnot, were arrested, arraigned, tried, many of them. Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, both going to prison. Carter Page, all the nonsense with General Flynn. You got 1,600 political prisoners who, even if you count the quote unquote violence, and I put that in quotes because we now know that there were 300 agents, federal agents in there instigating this. There were trucked in Antifa members. This whole thing was a false flag setup. But even if you count the people who actually engaged in some level of violence, of those 1,600 people, you could have tried like 4. That entire thing was a political prisoner dragnet to try to essentially end the MAGA movement and any hope of the Republican Party ever making a comeback. And that has all backfired and blown up in their face. And now we are finding out just how deep the rot goes. They are illegally spying on GOP senators. It goes all the way back to the Obama years, and it gets even worse. This is absolute bombshell stuff. There need to be prosecutions. There need to be trials. There needs to be accountability. There need to be prison terms, hundreds of prison terms for dozens of years. If we do not use this as a giant cudgel in order to rework the idea of deterrent, if people are not held accountable for this, the Democrats, the globalist cabal of corruptocrats, the Antifa members, the leftists, the socialists, the communists, they will continue to do this ad nauseum until they destroy our country. This is the time for accountability. Everybody who is involved in shenanigans like this needs to be held accountable via the judicial process, and it needs to be harsh. Absolutely brutal. Now, I'm going to dive in because Kash Patel was commenting on this. Now that he is running the FBI, I'm hoping beyond hope that him and Bongino will restore not only credibility to that office, but that they will bring accountability to the people who deserve it. Here we go.
It in a lockbox, put that lockbox in a vault, and then put that vault in a cyber place where no one can see or search these files. They're called restricted access and prohibited access. Restricted access means some people get to see it. Prohibited access, you put it in there when you want to hide it from the world, and that takes the authorization of the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI. So not only did they weaponize this law enforcement, but when we got in there, and when I got in as the FBI Director, from my experience as Russiagate, I knew where to look and what rooms to open and what doors to kick down. And that's what we did. We found this information to expose the politicization by Jack Smith and the prior Department of Justice. I mean, just think about it. 8 sitting United States senators. Phone records were gathered and subpoenaed through the grand jury process, and it was buried and wormholed with the hope that no one would find it. So we're just scratching the surface here, but accountability is coming. You're darn right I fired those agents. You're darn right I blew up CR-15, the public corruption squad that led the weaponization at the Washington field office. We're just warming up, but we are running our investigations to the ground. We are finding every single person involved. We will not leave a single room locked. We will go in through all the prohibited access requirements, and we will find the material and show the American public, like we have done in this FBI, more transformative and transparent than any in the U.S. history, to bring accountability to the American people. And we will work with our partners in Congress, who should be furious at the prior administration's leadership and weaponization and singular politicization of law enforcement. The American public sees what we're doing, Sean, with the stats you just read off in the beginning. They see what we're doing here to unseal the vault and show the world how the deep state actually operated.
I find that extremely interesting that they essentially tried to wormhole all this information under prohibited access. So they figured that they could get Kamala Harris in and they never have to deal with this again. So why put it under prohibited access? Because what they wanted to avoid was any potential whistleblower going to Congress, going to the media, going to anybody and saying, hey, we spied on senators. Hey, we illegally did this. Hey, all of this stuff about Crossfire Hurricane, about the weaponization of the FBI and the DOJ, yeah, it's all true. They didn't want whistleblowers. They didn't want real patriotic Americans to have access to that information. So they prohibited it access, which means, as he said, you had to have the director of the FBI and the AG sign off on opening that vault. Well, thank God we got President Trump in office. We got Kash Patel, who has some cojones, and Pam Bondi to sign off on this and start opening up Pandora's box of corruption, illegality, and treasonous activity. This is absolutely amazing. Now, it goes deeper. And like he said, they fired all the agents. That is but scratching the surface. They were doing it probably because they wanted to, but they were also doing it because they were told to. They need to track the money, track the authority. They need to figure out everybody who was involved in this, and there needs to be real accountability. Loss of prestige, loss of job, loss of pension, loss of money, loss of freedom. They need to be in prison. And some of them, if it rises to the level of treason, there might need to be some other losses that are involved in there as well. Now, all of this is combined with what Comey did. Realize that this whole Crossfire Hurricane, Arctic frost, all of it is combined. It's all related. It's all intertwined in the giant deep state corruption that they tried to use at the behest of the globalist cabal of corruptocrats, of whom they are all a part, to destroy the United States, to destroy our representative republic forever. They wanted to destroy it and turn it into a republic in name only that they controlled via their deep state apparatuses and apparatchiks, that they would never, ever be out of office again, that they would destroy the Republican Party, that they would weaponize every measure of United States government to ensure they never lost an election again. They would have had 20 million illegals in here, all of them with voting cards, all of them registered to vote, all of them voting, but not really voting. They'd have been harvesting those ballots for whoever they wanted. They would have had 20 million illegal voters. They would have turned the elections. There never would have been a free and fair election again. That was their goal, their ultimate goal, amongst many other things in terms of reigning control and tyranny on the U.S. populace. Now, to that end, we find out that this rot, as we have long said, that the worst president in the history of the United States, it's a toss-up between, well, it's not really a toss-up. I think the worst president was Obama, because although he looked slick and he had a nice smile and he was polished, he's the one who started all of this. The current level of race relations in America, the debacle that is the entire balkanized critical race theory that is now spread into LGBTQ and trans and the whole nine yards, that was all started under Obama. All of the weaponization of government, even though it was more secret back then, was all started under Obama. And you could even say it goes back to Bush and the whole Homeland Security, Patriot Act. Now, it might be that they had good intentions and that Obama used that act to weaponize everything. It could be because they're all deep staters, that it goes right back to Bush. But President Obama was the worst because he was the most effective at destroying the country. Biden was just a complete buffoon. Biden, from a policy perspective, from a public perspective, was the worst president in that realm. But in terms of setting the country back, it was by far Obama. Now, to that end, we've got Mike Benz, who is the expert of all things deep state, was on Joe Rogan, and he was talking about one particular aspect of what the deep state did, what they actually did under Obama with US taxpayer money, the lies that they told, and how this has translated to what we're seeing today, what we saw in the summer of quote unquote love in 2020, and what we're seeing today with the Antifa ICE riots in Portland, Chicago, LA, and others. Check this out. This is amazing stuff. It makes the hair on the back of my head, the back of my neck bristle. It makes me angry, but it's something that the American public needs to know. And we need to be able to take action against it. All right, let's dive in with Mike Benz. If you haven't subscribe to Mike Benz on Twitter, do so. It is a phenomenal read.
This was a scandal during the Obama USAID era. Now, we were running a number of rogue USAID operations in Cuba at the time. By the way, I have to say for the record, I'm no fan of the Cuban government. I'm not even weighing in on whether it's the right or wrong thing to do, in terms of regime change there or, liberating people there from autocratic excess by that government. I'm simply showing the American people where your tax dollars are going and how these things are structured in order to systematically fool you and to fool Congress and to fool the White House. So, for example, this is, and I'll show a couple other things in a second here. But so this is Zunzaneo. So if you just scroll for a second, we'll start with this, right? So it was an online social media. Just scroll up 1 second. We'll start at the top here. It was an online social networking microblogging service created by USAID and marketed to Cuban users. This was a Twitter knockoff. See, the background of this is 2009, 2014, that period. The State Department and USAID were gangbusters gung-ho on the promise of Arab Spring-style social media revolutions to topple other governments. The Arab Spring was a Facebook revolution and a Twitter revolution. USAID pumped $1.2 billion in, and we sponsored these activist groups and these civil society organizations to learn how to use Facebook, learn how to use Twitter, learn how to use hashtags, learn how to coordinate street protests so that everyone knows where to go, what street to show up on, what kind of slogans to use in order to create the pro-democracy, predicate for it. But the problem was at the time, Cuba did not allow U.S. social media in. So they said, so they're not allowing Twitter in. How can we get a Twitter there, but without calling it Twitter, without making it look like it's coming from the U.S.? So what they did is they took the exact same thing as Twitter. Same user interface, same like and retweet button. Zunzaneo is the Cuban slang word for hummingbird. So it means it's bird. It was the Twitter bird, the whole thing. But the whole trick about it was you have to make it look like it's coming from the Cubans if you're going to do this operation. So what you'll see is it began running. So this is 2010. This is right during the Arab Spring. And what you'll see is they took funds, millions of dollars of funds that were concealed as humanitarian funds designated for Pakistan. Now, I don't know if Joe or the audience, if you've looked at a map lately, but Pakistan is not exactly the next door neighbor of Cuba.
In other words, they laundered money. They laundered money in criminal operations in order to make this stuff happen. So they laundered U.S. taxpayer money criminally in order to make this happen. And what they were doing was setting up the means by which they could prompt, fuel, instigate, and maintain social media riots, protests, revolutions, you name it. And they practiced it around the world. Keep going.
Right. So, and this is the Wikipedia whitewashing, and we can get into the deeper layers of this, but contractors funded by USAID, I should note the main contractor was Creative Associates International, who's a frequent one. It's CAI, not CIA, I promise. So they concealed in the budget from Senate, from Congress, from the White House National Security Council. They said that these were humanitarian funds for Pakistan. And then they ran that to their contractor, CAI, to, quote, set up a Byzantine system of front companies using Cayman Islands bank accounts and recruiting unsuspecting business executives who would not be told of the company's ties to the U.S. government, according to the AP. The private companies like Creative Associates International designed the network. The idea arose after they were given 500,000 stolen Cuban cell phones that were available on the black market. And then what you'll see if you scroll down is okay, the network, dubbed the Cuban Twitter, reached about 60,000 Cuban subscribers. The initiative appears to also have had a surveillance dimension, allowing a, quote, vast database of Cuban Zunzaneo subscribers, including gender, age, and receptiveness and political tendencies to be built, with the Associated Press noting such data could be used in the future for political purposes. By the way, these are all quotes from the internal documents, and we can go through that. The data would then be used for micro-targeting efforts towards anti- and pro-government users in Cuba. The developers aimed to, at first, use non-controversial content, such as sports and music, and hurricane updates, by the way. They used hurricane updates in the internal things. Basically a humanitarian front that if you sign up to this app, you'll know about natural disasters in the area. Meanwhile, what was the plan the whole time? Once they built up enough subscribers, they would begin to introduce political messages through social bots and encourage dissent in this astroturfing. There's a great Guardian write-up on this. If you go to Guardian Zunzaneo, so you can see how crazy. Just type in Zunzaneo.
So they took U.S. taxpayer money. They laundered it through a Byzantine network of Cayman Islands and other, quasi sketchy accounts. They hid all this money from the executive branch, from the Congress, from the Senate, from U.S. National Security. They hid it from everybody. And what did they do? They were aiding and abetting terrorism around the world. They did it in Cuba. They did this in places like Ukraine. One of the reasons we have the Ukraine war is because they took what they learned doing this in Cuba and doing this in other places, and they did it in the Ukraine. They overthrew the duly elected Ukrainian government in 2014, and they installed their own puppet. And then they installed their own puppet again in Zelensky, and somebody who they could run. And this is why we have the nonsense that we have going on today. They did this in order to foment terrorism, revolution, war, the constant military industrial complex that bled Americans dry through taxpayer money, that bled other countries die through actual blood. It's absolutely egregious what they have done. And they learned how to do it so they could do it in the United States. Realize that the entire summer of love in 2020 was an outgrowth of what they did with all their experimentation on foreign lands. They did it again, but this time they did it in the United States. This time they overthrew a U.S. presidential election. Between that and the whole Hunter Biden nonsense, they overthrew they rigged a U.S. presidential election. Then they tried to do it in 2024. But we were able to overcome that. Now all of this is coming to the forefront. The fact that they laundered taxpayer money to create terrorist networks to overthrow other nations, the fact that they were spying on Donald Trump and all of his surrogates, or many of them, the fact that they were also spying illegally on 8 sitting U.S. senators, and at least 2 of those senators go all the way back to the Obama regime, and that Obama has his fingerprints all over this. There has to be accountability. There has to be real material losses by everyone involved. Loss of prestige, loss of status, loss of network, loss of job, loss of freedom, loss of money, all of it. Now, just to prove that this goes all the way back to Obama, here we go. So this is from the UK. This is President Obama authorizing Project Folsom. Permission to execute Project Folsom at the request of the U.S. president, seeking intelligence gathering into Trump. U.S. National Security Advisor Rice has requested that we continue our surveillance during the transition period as internal U.S. intelligence is potentially compromised by the incoming Trump administration. So you've got President Obama authorizing the illegal spying on Trump, on the Trump administration, on the incoming Trump government, as well as sitting GOP senators under Project Folsom, which then became Project Arctic Frost, which then became Project Crossfire Hurricane. And we have this almost 13 years now of spying, of illegal activity, of fomenting terrorism and revolution around the world that goes right back and lands at the feet of Barack Hussein Obama. And then goes through Clinton, Rice, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, all of them. And there needs to be real accountability. I wanted you to see this. I want you to see that they are, under Kash Patel, they are at least starting to figure out just how deep the rot goes, just how bad this cancer has metastasized inside the United States government. But I am with you, Rhonda. There must be accountability. The truth will always expose the wicked deeds of darkness. God will make sure of that. They will all eventually come out. The question remains right now, does the US government and the US populace have the stomach in order to see actual justice done against all of these people? And that's what needs to happen if we want our country back in the best form that it can be. I'm with you. There has to be accountability. So help me get accountability. First, by subscribing to the channel, hitting that like button, commenting for the algorithm, but then call your congressman, call your senator, tell them I want accountability for everybody who spied on Trump, who spied on 8 sitting senators, who was involved in any way, shape, or form in the false flag of January 6th, anybody who was involved with Jack Smith, with Letitia James, with Fannie Willis, all of this nonsense. They all need to be prosecuted. They all need to have their day in court. And frankly, I think they're all guilty. I think they all need to go to prison. But they certainly need to have their day in court. Let me know what you think in the comments. I really appreciate all of you rolling up. You are amazing. Please smash that like button for me. Subscribe, turn on the notifications. And if you could, share Courageous Media with everybody that you know. Also, if you're so inclined, join us as a member of the Courageous Army. Support the channel. Hit that join now button. Would really appreciate everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Remember, God is good and he is sovereign. It'll all be good in the end. Till I catch you next time.